There is no question the U.S. government knows much more about the USS Roosevelt UFO event series that took place in 2015 than they have revealed to the public. Strangely, it seems that former head of AARO, Dr. Sean Kirkpatrick, shows little interest in this event. I'll delve deeper into why I believe this as the video progresses. Journalist Merrick von Rennenkamp expressed concerns in a tweet based on his article, stating, "The U.S. government's former top UFO analyst," referencing Dr. Kirkpatrick, "is demonstrably wrong about the most recognizable UFO footage of all time." Chris Mellon responded to this tweet, adding, "I share the concerns expressed here regarding Dr. Kirkpatrick's assessments of the UFO videos taken by U.S. Navy aviators that appeared on the front page of the New York Times on December 16, 2022. And if the gimbal object had been a balloon somehow resisting hurricane-force winds, what about the cluster of smaller UAPs that were accompanying it, dispersed when the Navy F-18s arrived and rejoined the gimbal object when the Navy fighters departed?" Regarding the cluster accompanying the gimbal object that Mellon mentions, there is an animation made by someone on Twitter whom I haven't seen in a while and whose handle I can't recall. I seem to remember Ryan Graves commented on it, noting it was similar to the original film he saw. Here is that animation. Notice the cluster moving in concert with the larger gimbal object. Graves also discussed the original gimbal footage in a tweet from June 15th, 2022. "Where are the remaining 4 minutes of the gimbal video? Has Congress seen it? If not, why not?" Back in 2018, Danny Silva published an article titled, "5 UFO videos from the gimbal event," says Keith Basterfield. Let's read the entire article as it's very concise. And I quote, "We've heard a lot about other government UFO videos. The origins of some may be starting to come to light. On Coast to Coast AM with George Knapp on December 23, 2018, Keith Basterfield stated, 'Paul Dean and I have a source that tells us that at the 2015 off the Florida coast aircraft battle group encounters, there were at least 5 UFO videos taken on that occasion. We've only seen one of those, the Go Fast, and possibly the gimbal, possibly 2 of those. But there are certainly at least 3 more that we're aware of that were taken during that time.' The quote was transcribed and tweeted by UFO Joe. The legend Giuliano Marinkovic replied, 'Thanks, Joe. Since that part 5 is now in public domain, I can confirm Keith's claim. No further comments.' The gimbal event took place off the East Coast. Updates as they happen." End quote. On August 7th, Merrick von Rennenkamp published an article titled, "Why is the Pentagon's UFO office so clueless about UFOs?" I will recite an excerpt for you, and I quote, "At the same time, as I learned recently in a lengthy discussion with AARO's former director, the Pentagon appears clueless about the most recognizable, widely publicized UFO footage. This is particularly remarkable since the videos spurred significant congressional interest, leading ultimately to the establishment of the office. For example, Sean Kirkpatrick, who retired as AARO's director in December, told me that the well-known gimbal video, which a stunned Navy aircrew recorded hundreds of miles off the Florida coast in early 2015, was likely a balloon drifting in the wind. According to Kirkpatrick, the object's highly anomalous infrared signature was due to a reflection from the sun. But the government's former top UFO analyst is demonstrably wrong about the most recognizable UFO footage of all time. The gimbal incident, as the naval aviator who recorded the video confirmed in a congressional briefing, occurred at night, eliminating sun glare as a plausible source for the UFO's bizarre heat signature. Moreover, the aircrew are heard remarking in surprise that the gimbal object, along with a fleet of accompanying UFOs, are all going against the wind. The wind's 120 knots from the west.
Dude, this is a fucking drone, bro. There's a whole fleet of them. Look on the ASA. My gosh. They're all going against the wind. The wind's 120 knots from the west.
End quote of Merrick's article. If Dr. Sean Kirkpatrick, the former head of AARO, couldn't get right that the footage of the gimbal object was taken at night and consequently was obviously not showing an anomalous signature due to a reflection of the sun, then I don't really think it can be said that he cares about the USS Roosevelt UFO event series from 2015. As to why he apparently doesn't care, I'll let you decide. Personally, I think AARO is a disinformation activity, and their interest was never to be honest to the American public about UFOs. There's a lot to the USS Roosevelt UFO event series that we all know so well from the gimbal video that we have not been told. The U.S. government is not clueless on it. They have much more information than they've revealed about it. And the fact that they're so stingy in talking about it is a clear indication to me that it is truly an anomalous event and not merely some plane off in the distance. But I'm sure we haven't heard the end of that, and I'm sure we'll learn new things about it as time goes on. I want to change gears and talk a little bit about UFO author Keith Thompson. He has been making the rounds in interviews recently. Not too long ago, he was on James Iandoli's YouTube channel, Engaging the Phenomenon, and on August 4th, he was on New Thinking Aloud with Jeffrey Mishlove, and he wrote the book, The UFO Paradox, The Celestial and Symbolic World of Unidentified Aerial Phenomena, a book I plan on reading in the future. In the following clip, he speaks about a really interesting dynamic as he perceives it within the UFO community. This interview is from August 4th, and I'd like to delve into his perspective and give my take.
Let's talk about the developments that have occurred over the last 30 years in the field of ufology. I suppose the big one is that so much has happened with the U.S. government acknowledging the reality of the phenomenon, even though they kind of hedge about it and say, something's going on. We don't know what.
Yeah, the UFO, I like to say, got an acronym upgrade a few years ago from UFO to UAP. So there's a let's wipe the board clean. And Lou Elizondo came out with acknowledgement that he'd been leading a group of Pentagon researchers to study this phenomenon, which for decades, as you know, the government had officially said did not exist, and witnesses were routinely ridiculed. And so there is now an acknowledgement of unidentified phenomena, a theme that has been predominant in the UFO world. Can be stated as follows. Any day now, the lid on the government cover-up is going to blow sky high. Any day now, we're really finally there. And there is a new round of faith in that idea. I don't mean to make fun of it, but I do mean to remind those who are new to the phenomenon. You and I have been around for a while. You can tell by our haircuts that we've seen these patterns. We've seen this cycle go many times. And yet there is something new in the air right now. There's an acknowledgement of something going on. A former military official, intelligence official named David Grush, has penetrated as far as he could get, has come up with names and dates and locations of material that is being maintained allegedly by the aerospace companies. My only caution about that to those who came into the phenomenon around 2017, when the New York Times revealed the existence of the secret Pentagon group studying the phenomenon that is no longer secret, my only counsel would be to take a deep breath, say and acknowledge we've been here before. This may be the first rodeo for you. It may seem that the cover-up is about to blow sky high.
So I'm going to strive to steel man Keith Thompson's perspective as much as I can, but I still think he's doing a disservice in his description of the situation. Now, in fairness to Keith Thompson, I think what he's getting at mostly is that we've seen this cycle before. I think he didn't word this the best way because it could be perceived that he's contradicting himself, because he says there's something new in the air, and he goes into some depth as to what that encompasses, namely that the government has finally acknowledged that UFOs are a real mystery and are capable of maneuvers and technological feats that may not be aligned with any technological capabilities that we currently have. But as Jeffrey Mishlove pointed out, they kind of hedge when they say that, so they're not being fully transparent, but at least they're acknowledging the absolute reality of the mystery that is presented. They've never done that officially before. And then Keith Thompson goes into David Grush and underscores how this is part of what's new in the air, as he puts it. So, and he talks about how David Grush has given names and places and locations and dates, and that's true. He has given that to the Department of Defense Inspector General, as well as the Intelligence Community Inspector General. He has given that information to Senate staffers in a classified setting. He has given them leads to investigate, and also the Intelligence Community Inspector General is in the midst of an investigation into the claims of David Grush, not just reprisals, but also into the claims regarding a cover-up and not informing oversight bodies of what's going on, which is obviously a breach of the law. So in some sense, I feel like Keith Thompson contradicts himself, even if that wasn't his intention. It comes off that way, at least. If there's something so significantly new in the air, then you probably shouldn't say, but we've also been here before. No, we actually have never been here before. We haven't even been remotely close to where we are right now. But what I think Keith Thompson is saying is that we've been here before, or he's not saying that actually, or at least not as clearly as I think he should. I think what he intends to be taken away from what he is saying is that we've been here before in terms of anticipation for greater transparency. I don't really buy that argument, however. And I don't buy that argument for a variety of reasons. For one, we have the internet now. And the internet has gotten bigger than ever. And so filmmakers, researchers, activists have access to influencing the world in a way we have never had before. For two, we now have comprehensive legislation designed to break open the reality of UFOs in an official way, which would be an extraordinary challenge for the gatekeepers, because the UAP Disclosure Act 2.0 actually is intended to declassify files in historical reports so that we get exposed to the ultimate truth of what's taking place. And that legislation is not trivial. You can't just wave it away and say, oh, they'll figure out a way to bypass it. I am thoroughly unconvinced that the gatekeepers will figure out a way to bypass it if it indeed gets passed, because it is very, very comprehensive and was written by people who really know what they're doing, such as Chris Mellon. I also think that David Grush has contributed to the legislation, and others, known and unknown. I'm not going to go in depth into the legislation, but it is anything but trivial. And I actually believe if we are to get disclosure, it has to be through a legislative avenue, because it is the law that is protecting this information and keeping it from getting out. So therefore, you have to change the law to get the information out. Now, I realize that the cover-up is to some extent, at least in my opinion, illegal, but a lot of it is not illegal, which is exactly why you have to change the law. So why I disagree with Keith Thompson is I don't think we've been here before. In other words, I personally perceive that right now we have more justification to believe further progress is going to be made than ever before in UFO history. And this is not just some guess. It is based upon the historical developments that have taken place. It is based upon an ongoing investigation with whistleblower David Grush. It is based upon the UAP Disclosure Act 2.0 that will have a UAP records review board to release classified information to the public, and it's makes it very difficult to get around it. It is based upon gun camera footage being released by the Department of Defense associated with various pilots, not the least of which is Top Gun pilot David Fravor with the USS Nimitz UFO event series, which encompasses the FLIR 1 video. So, people like to say that, oh, this is just a repeat of the past, but that is just an unsubstantiated perspective. It is objectively not a repeat of the past. Now, will the lid blow open? I don't know. I don't have a crystal ball, but I would counter Keith Thompson's perspective by simply saying that we have never been here before. The historical developments that have happened have not happened in the past. This is not just government. You cannot boil this down to merely people coming forward and saying this phenomenon is real. We are talking about new legislation. We are talking about a whistleblower that came forward and talked about crash retrievals and non-human intelligence and satellite imagery of UFOs and misappropriation of funds to these illegal UFO programs, and doing it before Congress and televised as well. So no, we are not repeating the past. Now, if Keith Thompson's perspective is we should be cautious about our optimism, I can totally respect that. But the idea that we've been here before, I just think that's just flat out wrong. Analyst Matthew Pines on August 7th was on the show The Bitcoin Layer. And I'm going to share a clip where he goes into the importance and significance of the Rounds-Schumer UAP Disclosure Act legislation. But to set you up for that, I want to play a clip from a soliloquy in which the Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer, as well as Mike Rounds, were part of. And in the following clip, it's the Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer that talks about how credible people have informed him that UFO information has been withheld. And I think this will be a good clip to set up the Matthew Pines clip.
The United States government has gathered a great deal of information about UAPs over many decades, but has refused to share it with the American people. That is wrong, and additionally, it breeds mistrust. We've also been notified by multiple credible sources that information on UAPs has also been withheld from Congress, which, if true, is a violation of the laws requiring full notification to the legislative branch, especially as it relates to the 4 congressional leaders, the defense committees, and the Intelligence Committee.
And the implication of testimony by David Grush, by Carl Nell, by others behind closed doors to inspectors generals, but also importantly to intelligence committees on the Hill, specifically the Senate and House Permanent Select Committee on Intelligence, is that we have been studying these phenomenon for many decades. In fact, we have in possession technologies of unknown origin in biological materials. Those turns of phrase are explicitly defined by Senate legislation that was introduced last year called the Unidentified Anomalous Phenomenon Disclosure Act. Kind of says it, right? And they passed it. The Senate passed that bill, 64 pages of bill. I can't, read the whole bill to you, everyone on this listening to this podcast, but I would encourage everyone, if you want to just acquaint yourself with what your legislators are putting in law, what definitions that they're writing when they have to define non-human intelligence, which they use in that bill 14 times, when they define technologies of unknown origin, when they stipulate legacy programs to retrieve and exploit technologies of unknown origin associated with UAP. This should be this is like the equivalent of the U.S. government writing serious legislation to, find Bigfoot.
I absolutely love how Matthew Pine said that this legislation is like the equivalent of legislation about Bigfoot. That really gets to the heart of how much of a tectonic shift this is in terms of where we've come to and how different it is from the past. And I don't think there's any dispute about that. A lot of people, I'm not sure why they're so committed to a position that I think is completely unsubstantiated. But a lot of people like to say that it's just the same old, it's a new cycle. No, it's not a new cycle. If you want to say we should be cautious about it turning out the way we want it to, that's fine. But don't say it's just a repeat of the past, because that's just factually inaccurate, and you're just spreading misinformation as far as I'm concerned. On June 27th, 2023, Washington correspondent for News Nation, Joe Khalil, interviewed Marco Rubio. And I'm going to share a small segment of that interview where Marco Rubio goes into whistleblowers that have come forward regarding legacy UFO programs.
Sorry, people who have had firsthand knowledge, who claim to have firsthand knowledge of seeing this type of thing?
That's or have firsthand knowledge or firsthand claims of certain things. Some are public figures, and you've heard from them in the past. Others, have not shared publicly. And so we're trying to gather as much of that information as we can. And the reason why I'm being cautious, I'm not trying to be evasive, but I am trying to be protective of these people. Some of these people still work in the government. And frankly, a lot of them are very fearful of their jobs, fearful of their clearances, fearful of their career. And some, frankly, are fearful of harm coming to them. And so I want to be very sort of, respectful of that, because I don't want to discourage others from coming forward.
In the body of that interview, Senator Marco Rubio said that some that have come forward are past officials within the government, and some are still employed in the government, which I think puts things in perspective. And he talked about how him and others created new whistleblower protections for UFO whistleblowers, which is a perfect example of something that is entirely new. When has legislation ever gotten passed in the past for the purpose of protecting specifically UFO whistleblowers? Now, someone in an attempt to try to downplay what's going on now may reference the famous story, which even whistleblower David Grush has cited, the story with Senator Barry Goldwater when he approached General Curtis LeMay requesting if he could access the Blue Room at Wright-Patterson Air Force Base because he believed there were recovered UFO non-human intelligence materials stored there. And as the story goes, General Curtis LeMay got extremely angry and told Senator Barry Goldwater to never ask him about that again. So no one is claiming that members of Congress have never displayed interest into the cover-up, into UFOs. But it has never, ever been so systematic before where there's actual new laws on the books to protect UFO whistleblowers, and they are systematically going to, for example, the intelligence community inspector general and to Congress reporting on these programs. This has never happened before on this scale and in this systematic way. So we are indeed in new waters. And because we're in new waters, I can totally understand why people are more optimistic than they have been in the past, that we will perhaps get more transparency from the U.S. government as these developments unfold. Now, you know, I will counter that, or I will balance that with something that journalist George Knapp has stated in the past, that the gatekeepers of this subject are better at what they do than we are at what we do. That is, people trying to remove the excessive secrecy. And I understand that dynamic, but nevertheless, I think that people are fully justified to be more optimistic now than they were 10 years ago. Where I can respect the debate is how much more optimistic should we be. But regardless of how much more optimistic we should be or not, things have certainly changed, and it looks like things are going to continue on this trajectory. I think I've covered enough ground here. I'll end this video with a tweet that James Iandoli of Engaging the Phenomenon made on August 2nd, 2024. He wrote, Lou Elizondo book is imminent. This UAP, NHI, consciousness discussion is imminent. It's already here because it is ever present. We are not going back. From this point, we can only move forward. Take a deep breath, be grateful, consider reality, be kind to others, stay strong. So I don't have a crystal ball. The only point I'm trying to drive home is, and it's just my subjective take, is that people are justified to be, at the very least, a little more optimistic than they were 10 years ago with where the UFO subject is headed. But at the end of the day, I don't know what's going to happen. However, if we are ever to make headway in understanding the origin and the agenda of some of these phenomena that are experienced, then I think it is definitely in our best interest to have a global acknowledgement of this issue so that it no longer remains within the fringes of society where too few minds are looking at this seriously. If you'd like to support this channel, you can check out my merch shop where I sell t-shirts. You could become a patron. You could become a YouTube member. You could give me a one-time donation. All those possibilities can be accessed in the description box below, or you could just give me a thumbs up, and I'd appreciate it so much. You can just slap a like on that bad boy, as I usually say. I'll see you in the next episode. Special thanks to all patrons, YouTube members, those that have bought merch, those that have given me a one-time donation. I couldn't do without you. Thank you so much. See you in the next episode.